Good.
Good morning, Seoul. Good evening, America. I'm Professor Usang Kim, currently Professor of Political Science at the Yonsei University. Formerly, I served as a Korean ambassador to Australia and the president of Korea Foundation. I also have chance to teach at United States, Texas A&M University for about 7 years. Uh, I'm very much honored to moderate today's webinar. Can you hear me very clearly? Okay. Co-sponsored by the FMC, ALC, and J. Kim Foundation. Our main topic of the day is the ROK US, the Republic of Korea, United States alliance relationship under the new Biden administration. Before we begin today's discussion, let me briefly introduce three prominent participants. Honorable Charles Bustani, Honorable Martin Frost, and Honorable J. Changjun Kim. Honorable Bustani served as a Republican member of the United States House of Representatives from Louisiana from 2005 to 2017. He was a retired cardiovascular surgeon before he became the member of Congress. He is currently the president of the FMC. Honorable Martin Frost served as a Democratic member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Texas from 1979 to 2005. He holds a Juris Doctorate degree from Georgetown University. He is a former president of the FMC. Honorable J. Changjun Kim was a former Republican member of the U.S. House of Representatives from California from 1993 to 1999. He was the first Korean American to be elected to the United States Congress. He holds his doctorate degree of political science from Hanyang University in Korea. Currently, he is the chairman of Kim Chang-jun U.S. Korea Foundation and Kim Chang-jun Academy. Biden administration's foreign policy vision is known to be restoring American leadership and renewing its own democracy and alliances. The U.S. is facing many serious challenges such as corona pandemic, climate change, nuclear proliferation, cyber warfare, mass immigration, and great power aggression to challenge the existing international and regional order like China and Russia. All these, just to name several. President Biden got off to the best start and already signed many executive orders and executive memos to deal with these tough problems, but most of them are related to the domestic issues. Today, we'll discuss North Korea's nuclear and human rights violation issues and China's assertiveness and its potential impact on the regional security and economic order and ROK-US alliance relationship. Many of us are wondering that Biden administration considers these foreign policy issues in Korea as one of the priority agendas. Okay. Of course, the Moon Jae-in administration here in Korea will consider the North Korean nuclear issue as the most important agenda of the day. Do you think that North Korean issue can be included as one of the priority agenda list in the Biden administration? That's my
Charlie, you
first
want to
question.
start?
Who wants to go first?
Let Charles go first.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Yes, I do. I do believe that the North Korea situation is going to be a priority, and it's very serious. It's a complex issue or set of issues. and there are no easy solutions to it. We know that the Obama administration tried one approach, strategic patience. The Trump administration tried direct summit diplomacy, followed by harsh sanctions. None of those seem to have worked, and there's really no good solution. But I do believe the Biden administration will put a top priority on this because it's critically important for security in the region. And I think there will be a combination of multilateral diplomacy, very close collaboration with South Korea, and the sanctions will continue for a while, and they will have to work through how to use the sanctions as leverage. But I also think that prior to any direct engagement between the U.S. and North Korea, there will be a lot of preparatory diplomacy and close collaboration with South Korea and other allies in the region. It's a tough situation, but it will be a priority.
And I would agree. I think that our relationship with Korea will continue to be very important for our country. And certainly our relationship with South Korea is vital to our own national interests. South Korea has been a very good ally of the United States, has taken part in a number of military operations that the United States has been involved in, perhaps more than almost any other country in the world. And I think that an indication of the new administration's view of the importance of Korea and of Asia generally was the appointment of Wendy Sherman as the number 2 person in the State Department during previous Democratic administrations. She was very much involved in issues pertaining to North Korea and to the nuclear issue. She will play a key role in advising our new Secretary of State. And clearly, Asia is every bit as important to the United States as Europe. Now, I think initially the administration wants to restore better feelings with Europe because President Trump was so negative as to our relationship with NATO and with Western Europe. And so obviously there'll be some initial steps in terms of Europe, but what happens in Asia is vitally important to the United States. There are, as you know, there are a number of Korean companies that employ thousands of people in the United States, providing jobs all over our country. In my own case, the district that I represented in the Dallas-Fort Worth area had a very large Korean population. And we were chatting before this program started. I had the privilege of appointing 2 Korean young men from my district to West Point. They were high achievers, and they did well. So you will find that there are Korean populations all through the United States. Certainly in Northern Virginia, where I am right now. I live in Old Town Alexandria. I wrote a book about Congress with Tom Davis, former Republican congressman, and he had a very large Korean population in Fairfax County. And I know that this is true in other major parts of the country. So the Korean community has been very active politically in the United States. I think will continue to be active in both parties, and I think that's important. You want a bipartisan relationship, bipartisan support, and I think that you will continue to see the United States play an active role. And clearly our new president, President Biden, wants to do things differently than President Trump did in terms of relationship with North Korea. That was generally viewed as a failure by Trump.
I agree with both of you that if you look at the previous administrations, they were not so quick in appointing the officials who deal with this Korea and Asian issue. But this new Biden administration was very quick in appointing Tony Blinken, Wendy Sherman, Kurt Campbell, Sung Kim. All of them are experts on North Korean issues and China issues, in these issues in this area. So they are very quick. But one thing that I'm worrying about is, during the confirmation hearings, 4-hour-long confirmation hearings for Mr. Blinken, there's only 9 times mentioned North Korea. The word North Korea is mentioned only 9 times, and South Korea mentioned only 1 time, compared to 73 times of Iran and China 66 times. If you remember 4 years ago, when there was a confirmation hearing for Mr. Tillerson, there was about 30 times mentioning of North Korea and 11 times, I think, of South Korea. But compared to those numbers, this time it's almost nothing. So I'm just worrying that although everybody thinks that these issues are very important, this is a very important place for the United States as well, but on the priority list, it may be not on the top list. That's what some of the Koreans are worrying about.
Well, I
Charles,
think,
you want to come?
I think it's the Korean Peninsula is going to be one of the top issues going forward, without question. South Korea, the Republic of Korea, is our most important security ally in that area for a variety of reasons. As Martin pointed out, we have a long history of collaboration after World War II in the military space. We have been dealing with the problems with North Korea since then, and doing it together. I think broadly, whether it's North Korea and the security situation directly pertaining to North Korea, or the broader issues of Chinese assertiveness in the region, South Korea is going to be a critical partner, and this issue is going to be top of mind for the Biden administration. Secondly, Martin's correct, and you're correct in that there are very experienced people that have been brought into the Biden administration. But I think we're going to see an unprecedented level of interagency coordination with economics and security issues in Asia being top of mind for the Biden administration. Kurt Campbell, who has been brought in to coordinate this interagency process, along with Jake Sullivan over at the NSC, I think they're going to tap into the best expertise across all these agencies to put together a real strategy, a comprehensive strategy in dealing with these very complex issues. Europe is important, but Europe is important to be aligned with the U.S. and our Asian allies as we deal with both North Korea and more broadly with China's assertiveness. So I think despite the fact that South Korea was not mentioned much in the initial hearings, there will be more to come, and I think it will be a major priority going forward.
And Professor Kim, I would point out, of course, that the mention of particular countries really is a product of the questions asked by the members of the committee, asked by the Foreign Relations Committee. And perhaps some members of the committee were more preoccupied immediately with other parts of the world. But that in no way indicates that the new administration is not vitally interested in Asia and specifically in Korea.
All right.
One of the things that I believe will be different between this administration and the previous administration is that I think there will be much greater staff preparation before there is any meeting of the leaders. I think that President Trump felt like he could engage in personal diplomacy just almost off the cuff, but without having a lot of staff work in advance. That's generally not the way foreign policy has worked for either party in our recent history. There is always considerable staff preparation. I think with the case of the Biden administration, these issues will be staffed and discussed at great length before there is any meeting between the principals. And I think that's one of the differences you're going to see in the months ahead.
Oh, let's hope for the big support from interagency process and also greater staff preparation. I think it's a really, really important point that you mentioned. So you don't think that those numbers of North Korea and South Korea mentioning during the confirmation hearing does not demonstrate that the Biden administration policy will go back to the Obama administration's strategic patience policy toward North Korea.
No, I don't
No,
think
I
so.
don't.
And maybe Charles. You,
The
yeah.
Biden administration to go back to the strategic patience policy.
Can I answer to that? Can you hear me better now?
Yes,
We
yes,
can hear you
better.
now. Good.
Yes,
Good.
Great.
Better.
I can you hear me? All right.
Yes,
You're talking
yes.
Yes.
about strategic
Yes.
patience. That was Obama policy, by the way. And 8 years in politics term, they never met each other. Using this strategic patience policy, I think Biden would be the same. I don't think he'll take the initiative and calling Mr. Kim asking for meetings. I think it's because of the bottoms up policy. It's not going to be acceptable to Kim in North Korea. He doesn't have any second man in command, so he's never done this bottom up policy. He's totally foreign to it. So I think it's not going to work, in my opinion. And so I'm kind of negative on this particular issue. But knowing Mr. Biden, he's not a proactive man. He's been around so long that he's sort of reactive. As I said before, his urgent agenda is domestic issue. So North Korea is not the highest priority in his mind. So I think in North Korea it's going to be secondary issue. It's going to be a long time wait until just thinking about this North Korea issue. That will be my answer to the first question.
Okay. I hope the Biden administration move quickly, much quicker than what Honorable Kim just mentioned. Let me bring up one more for the North Korea nuclear issue. On February 29, 2012, Obama administration tried to exchange North Korea's moratorium on ICBM and nuclear tests with provision of about 240,000 tons of nutrition food assistance. That was known as February 29th agreement, although it was not carried out. Do you think that there is a possibility that Biden administration might try another small deal instead of a big deal? Small deal meaning maybe nuclear freeze in North Korea in exchange for lifting of partial economic sanctions against North Korea instead of the whole CVID of North Korea, complete, irreversible, verifiable dismantlement of North Korean nuclear weapons.
Charles, you want to try?
Well,
Yeah,
I think
the way I understand-
Jay was.
The way I understand a small deal and big deal in political sense, small deal means that Yongbyon facility is about to be destroyed. It's not functioning right anyway. So one site will be destroyed, a small deal. Big deal is we know that there's 4 other facilities out there, Trump claiming. All 4 of them got to be destroyed per Resolution 2270, United Nations. So that's what it is, the way I understand. I think the question is, Obama administration, I don't mean, accept a small deal. I think he will accept small deal because it looks like he accomplished something. The public doesn't know it's a small deal, a big deal. But when you put that on the newspaper, the small deal was achieved, they finally agreed, signed the contract. Well, that people think is much better than what Trump did, which is talking about it. Big deal, never done anything. So it's going to be popular. I think you'll speak to small deal, and that's going to be done and very soon. Because Yongbyon facility is going to be out of order anyway. Said enough on that.
Okay.
Charles, you want to chime in?
Well, I mean, obviously, a small deal has limitations, and even verifying whether there's compliance is going to be a problem. It doesn't solve the ballistic missile problem. It doesn't really create the kind of security certainty for allies in the region, especially for South Korea. It's going to be interesting. I think the Biden administration has not laid out with any level of detail how they'll approach the problem of North Korea, but we know it's a big problem and it needs to be addressed. I think there's going to be careful planning before any overtures are made. Now, if Kim Jong-un reacts and does something provocative, that could change the calculation and the sense of urgency, and it might lead to some sort of accommodation, but that's not going to be satisfactory in the long run. So a small deal could be part of a broader strategy as an interim step. But I think the administration will prefer to go with a more comprehensive approach to the peninsula.
And let me respond to something that Jay Kim mentioned a moment ago. I would not view Biden as being strictly reactive. Remember that Biden spent a great deal of his senatorial career on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He is steeped in foreign policy in a way that a number of presidents, both Democrats and Republicans, have not been. And I think he'll be very creative. I don't think he's going to sit back and wait for something to happen. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt, because so much of his life has been devoted to our relationship with the rest of the world.
Yeah, most of the Korean people know that President Biden is an expert in foreign affairs. No matter what, most of the Korean people want to make sure that the CVID of North Korea is our final goal, not anything less than CVID. Okay, now let's move on to another issue. The Biden administration emphasizes such values as democracy and human rights. Former Secretary of State Pompeo and new Secretary of State Blinken both mentioned about the genocide in Xinjiang in China. Okay, and they also know the human rights violation in North Korea, one the most closed society in the world. Recently, the ruling party in South Korea National Assembly, supported by the Moon Jae-in administration, passed the anti-leaflet law. I think you must have heard about this, right? Which bans the effort of providing outside information to the North Korean people through leaflet balloons and loudspeakers. Do you think that it will have a negative impact on our alliance relationship?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that our country does not try and order our allies what they should or shouldn't do. Now, my guess is that the new administration will have some detailed conversations with the current government in South Korea about this legislation, because we do stand for human rights and we do stand for providing information around the world. We've done that a lot all over the world, much to the chagrin of the Soviets, now the Russians, in Eastern Europe, because we took a very aggressive stance in advocating human rights and providing information that their own government would not provide to their citizens. I can't predict what the administration will do, and again, you're a sovereign country, and we can't tell you what to do. But my guess is that there'll be some discussions on this subject, and perhaps there'll be a modification of that policy. But it ultimately is up to your government. It's not up to us as to whether you can have balloons floating over into North Korea with leaflets and food and other items.
But we hear Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission is preparing for the congressional hearings in the United States. Have you had a chance to hear about that?
I've heard that's the case. I don't know what the details will be, but Martin is right that human rights is a very important component of U.S. foreign policy. It has been for many years. The passage of the anti-leaflet law provoked a bipartisan backlash in Congress. There were Democrats and Republicans who expressed concern and overt opposition to that type of law. But I do believe the Biden administration will have quiet discussions about this. And it's interesting in Tony Blinken's hearing, his confirmation hearing, he talked about conducting foreign policy with humility. And I think that's going to be a different approach than what we've seen for quite some time now. And I think there will be a sensitivity to domestic concerns in South Korea and how we can coordinate our approach across all these issues more closely. Nothing's going to interfere. No single incident like this will interfere with the long-standing relationship we have between our two countries. It is a very strong relationship, but it also needs to be nurtured. It's been under strain during the Trump administration for a number of reasons, and I think there will be an attempt by the Biden administration in our dealings with South Korea to work very closely, to work quietly, to coordinate, to align our interests to the fullest extent possible. And that's going to be important in the long run in dealing not only with North Korea, but with China as well.
Certainly one of, I'm sorry, Jay, did you want to speak on this?
Right. This balloon issue, sure, you looked at that as a human rights violation. But if you look at the other side, that 2 weeks ago, North Korea demonstrated huge submarine-launched ballistic missile. It's a Mach 5, speed of sound faster than 5 times speed of sound. That scared the hell out of Korean people, scare me. And that can be right next to shoreline. They shoot the ballistic missile vertically. It can reach nearly anywhere within 100 miles. And so what happened? One bomb can destroy Seoul, Korea. It can kill 100,000 people. Knowing the fact that it scared the hell out of a lot of Korean people, that's what this idea come from. They object. North Korea strongly object this balloon. The government objects. Citizens like it. They opened up. There's money there. There's food there. They love it. But government says no. That's what the South Korean government is a little afraid. They might retaliate with this SLBM. So you can understand. Question is, life is depend on it. 100,000 lives versus balloon. Human rights violation. I think we understand that position. Just look at the one side only, human rights issue. That I wish you would look at both sides.
But what we are facing is the North Korean problems, right? Nuclear problems and human rights violation problems, and we have to deal with this issue. And you heard about Mr. Tae Yong-ho, who deserted to South Korea a couple of years ago while he was serving as a DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission in the North Korean Embassy in London. He now became a Korean National Assemblyman. He has been arguing that the best way to deal with the North Korean problem is to provide outside information to the North Korean people by all possible means, as much as information, by all possible means. Don't you think that the anti-leaflet law collides with, for example, freedom of speech?
Well, in theory, you're right. But in reality, you're not right. Because look at this. I told you SLBM's awful bomb. They have demonstrated they were happy. People are screaming happy. But look at living in South Korea scare me. So tremendous power in there. So submarine launched ballistic missile. You know that one shot destroyed the soul. Knowing the fact that it's that monster threat, what would you do? Are you going to stick human violations? I don't know. It's just if you understand the story and reality, I think you understand why they are doing this thing.
Jay, go ahead, Charles.
Go ahead.
You know I'm going to steal. Go ahead.
Well, let me respond a little bit. Go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry, Charles.
No, go ahead, Martin. Go ahead.
Jay, I was just going to point something out, and this, of course, occurred in a different part of the world. A number of years ago, when the Berlin Wall fell, I was part of the first U.S. congressional delegation to Berlin, and we met with the East Berliners, East Germans, who were pro-democracy, and they asked us for some help in teaching them about a democratically functioning parliament. And so I came back and I talked to the Speaker of the House, Tom Foley, at that time, and I relayed this information. Speaker Foley thought that was a good idea, and in fact, we had a program to help the newly emerging democratic parliaments in a number of countries in Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, other countries. And so I had the chance to visit those areas, and I met with some of the people who were pro-democracy, but who'd been imprisoned, who'd had all kinds of hardships during the communist regimes. And I asked them, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay in your country? And they said, well, we believed ultimately that democracy would triumph. And they pointed to the role of Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and providing them information that they couldn't get from their own government about what was going on in the rest of the world and what the United States stood for. I hope that there can be some resolution. I understand what you're saying. If I lived in Korea, I'd be a lot more concerned about bombs than I would about freedom of speech at this point. I understand what you're saying. But I would hope that you would find a way, and perhaps with the assistance of our government, in continuing to provide information to the people of North Korea about how oppressive their system is, how oppressive their government is, and why they might have a better life if they decided to do something else.
Well, I think that has been tried in the past. North Korea is a closed society. It's very difficult to get the information through the citizens out there. This balloon, you know what contains in there? Mostly money and food, dry food. That's it. For the supply to those poor people. Now, that's not the government. And I understand some little leaflet, but that's supported by the people who escaped from the North Korea. The other one donate the money, put this food package together, and they're using balloons to know. So you can relate that to human rights issue. I just don't understand that at all. And then North Korea objecting it, so we stop it because using democracy as a reason. I don't know. I'm just absolutely against that.
Well, okay, let's move on to another topic. Just like Trump administration, Biden administration seems to consider China as its main competitor. I remember candidate Biden called President Xi Jinping as a thug during the election campaign. Is that going to be just a part of election process, or will President Biden be really serious about it? You know, during the confirmation hearings of Mr. Blinken, Mr. Austin, and Ms. Yellen, all of them consider China as a serious threat against the United States security and economy. And recent report from the prestigious American think tanks even suggested a strategy to remove only Chinese President Xi Jinping without antagonizing whole Chinese people. Okay, how do you think about China? Do you think China is your enemy or is a partner to cooperate together to deal with all these challenges that you're facing, including North Korean nuclear issue?
I'd like to, if I could, Jay, if I may
real quick
at this point.
on Martin, because I was there. During Korean War, 36,000 U.S. soldiers got killed, which we should not forget it. When Chinese invaded South Korea, killed 30,000 civilians. That's a fact. Now, Now we talk about whose side we are in. Well, it's up to you. Make a judgment on that. Now, when China is North Korea's behind, a real power. When you when you're talking about war with the North Korea means war with the China. Well, war with the China means World War III. We're talking about whole world, another third world war. If we don't want it, then we got to be very careful about that. So North Korea means China. China behind it. China took a lot of other allies out there making big world war. So, in my opinion, I think we got to be very careful. Got to make sure that who's our enemy. I think not the USA and North Korea, China, they got together and was Quad. They passed the Quad. I don't know, just concerned about this. Who's outside? Who's enemy? We should look at that way.
Jay, I think we should give Congressman Bustani a chance here because he was on the Trade Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee and was right in the middle of a lot of these issues dealing with China and other countries that we're in a serious economic struggle with. Charles, is it correct to say that China is our number one enemy? I'm very skeptical about our relationship with China. I think they are very tough. They take the long view, and I think we need to be very serious in terms of our relationship with them. I'm not too crazy about cozying up to them, if that's what Jay is asking. But Charles, from a trade standpoint, where do we stand?
No, I'm not saying.
Well, I
China.
think that
China is no, of course not. We're doing a lot of business with China, but some, I think Biden even saying that all the trade issues that U.S. soldiers are here protecting South Korea. Meantime, Korean government is doing business with China behind the back. That's what I read it the other day. That's not true. Well, you just got to be walking in thin eyes. When you say question is USA or China, when you get a choice like that, that's what I'm talking about. Of course not. China is a big. It's a first thing you want to.
Honorable Bustani, would you want to respond?
Sure. So I do believe China under the Xi Jinping regime and leadership is a strategic threat to a liberal order that we're used to and that we've all benefited from. The question is, how do you deal with this threat posed by a revisionist power that is authoritarian, that breaks the rules, whether it's trade, they steal intellectual property, they have a very assertive military, and they are dominant in the Asia-Pacific region, both economically, and they have significant dominance and near capabilities to what the U.S. military can project. So we have to deal with this from a very realistic standpoint. And we also have to be respectful of the fact that our security partners in the region have very strong trade and investment relations with China. So there's this great extent of economic interdependence at the same time that there's a security threat. So the United States really cannot come in and try to coerce our allies to separate or decouple from China, independently or separately, and take sides. We have to create, from a U.S. strategic perspective, we have to create circumstances where our allies see that it's in its benefit to associate closely with us. We have to align on standards for technology. We have to beef up our security relationship and coordinate security in the region better. And the United States needs to overcome its economic absence in the region that's occurred, especially over the last 4 years, but actually since we put in place the trade agreement with South Korea, there has not been U.S. economic engagement. So we should build on the economic engagement that was put together between the U.S. and Korea. The U.S. should partner with Korea and join and set up negotiations to enter into the CPTPP and create a regional economic bloc that sets high standards for trade, investment, and technology, and then basically use that leverage economically to approach China and say, you're on the outside looking at what we're doing. We need to put China in a position of having less favorable conditions to participate in supply chains. We need to put China in a position where it's not setting standards in the region. So the U.S. should be engaging multilaterally. It should be engaging in regional trade agreements. And we should be giving our allies in the region security assurances and coordinating a better security approach in general. Very simple answer is this. We need to maximize aggregate leverage with allies in the region. And we also need to coordinate with allies on security, but also security within supply chains to create more resilient supply chains and diversified supply chains. That will put pressure on China. And then we test Xi Jinping whether he's got intentions to reform or not. I don't think he will, but we will be better prepared to deal with him and his regime if we're fully allied in the way I just described.
Well,
Korea is a member of RCEP already, and Korea, I think, will be very willing to participate in the CPTPP as well. But recently, Jake Sullivan, the new National Security Advisor, mentioned that quadrilateral security dialogue mechanism is going to be a important player in this region. Meaning that not just U.S., Japan, India, and Australia, but there may be a pressure for South Korea and maybe other partners to participate in Quad. How do you think? Because the Korean government are thinking that it's a pressure to choose sides between the United States and China. Just like Southeast Asia countries neighboring China, South Korea has to have a protection from the United States, security protection from the United States. But South Korea also needs a big Chinese economic market. So, just like many Southeast Asian countries, Korea is also, stuck in between the two big powers.
Well, I think it's important to sequence what you're doing properly. I understand the emphasis on the Quad, but that should be done in a quiet fashion. It's not as coherent as some would believe. India still remains a bit of a problem, and coordinating that is an issue. But here's the bigger problem. We need a broader approach to China than just simply the Quad and its security arrangement, because in a sense, by speaking about the Quad as a priority, it's almost equivalent to what Dean Acheson said when he was describing situations of strength in Asia, and he left out Korea, and that left the door open for the actual invasion by the North. So that's a danger. Korea needs to be Korea is a very important part of the equation on both the security and the economic phases of what we're trying to do in Asia as a comprehensive strategy. And to overemphasize the Quad without including Korea in these discussions, I think is a mistake.
I agree with Quad. Speaking of Quad, the Quad is a Japanese-driven Quad. And the members are USA, Japan, India, and what's the other one? Australia. But then Korea was kind of jacked that. Why Korea was not included? Finally, they added to Quad Plus. That's what Korea is in. Korea, New Zealand, and Quad Plus. So now we're in Quad Plus. I think that's an insult. So Korea should be a regular member of part of the four instead of added later on to Korea Quad Plus. The Quad is nothing but a NATO military alliance in Europe, and Quad is just an Asian version of NATO. I don't know.
My personal opinion, Korea has to participate in the Quad. But no matter what, I do not want to be considered a Quad line as previous Atchison line. Korea is out of this protection from the United States. So we do not want to hope that that kind of things happen. I think we spent a lot of time. Let's move on to another issue. It's about Iran's hostage case. I think you heard about it. Iranian Revolutionary Guards seized a South Korean vessel holding South Korean and Southeast Asian personnel hostages in retaliation for about $7 billion of Iranian money because we imported crude oil from Iran and we have to pay this about $7 billion. But it is frozen in South Korean banks because of the U.S. Treasury's secondary boycott. Do you think that there is a possibility for U.S. play some kind of role in resolving this issue?
Well, I think what's going to happen with this is I don't expect the Biden administration to withdraw the sanctions without getting something in return. The Biden administration clearly wants to get to the negotiating table with Iran and rejuvenate the Iran nuclear agreement, hold Iran accountable for that. But I believe they want to go further than that and address a more permanent resolution of the nuclear situation in Iran, but also issues pertaining to ballistic missiles and Iran's support of terrorism. So this is going to be a complex diplomatic approach that they're trying to orchestrate. So if they don't pull the sanctions back immediately, then I think we're still at an impasse. I'm not sure what else the U.S. might do to help South Korea secure the release. Maybe in the early opening negotiations, they could ask for that to release the hostages and the vessel as part of a reason to start negotiations again. Maybe that's one way to do it, but I don't think the sanctions will be removed anytime soon until they get further down the line with negotiations with Iran.
But we understand that the American government tried to re-enter the JCPOA with Iran, right? So if U.S. decided to re-enter the previous agreement, then there is a possibility of lifting sanctions against Iran. That could help South Korea resolving this Iran hostage issue. Don't you think?
Right. I think if that door opens, go ahead, Martin.
Let me make one. Yeah, I think that's possible. But this is, as Charles has pointed out, this is a very complicated situation, and there are strong views in the United States. There was a good bit of support for the president withdrawing from the nuclear agreement with Iran. I think he's serious and he wants to re-engage with Iran, but I think this isn't going to happen overnight. I hope that the Korean situation, the hostage situation, and the ship situation will be part of this negotiation, but I don't expect that to be resolved right away.
I agree. I think Iran, the way I understand, its government is so corrupted, and we don't know the line of command, which is which. And there's revolutionary forces out there, very, very confusing. And by the way, Iranians supply all the power supply to North Korea. They're North Korean side. That's another one bothers South Korea. And it's just the problem of dealing with Iran is so complicated. I think USA should step in and help on this matter because Korea alone, I don't know if Korea can handle that. It's a very complicated issue. Like Charles, and you mentioned that releasing hostages is going to be a political issue. They're going to be politically use it. I don't know. I just don't understand the Iran why we are doing such a thing. And of course, we are following USA sanctions. USA sanction against Iran, then Korea is following because of this friendship. And anyway, in my opinion, USA can step in, can help the Korea. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere.
I would agree with that. Now, Jay, one thing that is important in this equation, Congress a few years ago eliminated the ban on the export of crude oil from the United States. There had been a 40-year ban, not refined products, but crude oil. And it may be that, and I believe that some of that crude oil has since then been exported to South Korea. And it may be possible that this could be part of the equation also. That I don't know that. I'm not sure that there'd be support in the United States for exporting crude oil to North Korea, but that may be a pretty good sized carrot to hold out for a larger arrangement. I think it's unfortunate that they're reliant on exports from importing oil from Iran, and it would be nice if we could lessen their dependence on the leverage that Iran holds over them.
Well, I just hope that this Iran hostage issue can be resolved quickly. We are just hoping that. Okay, let's move on to another issue. How about defense burden sharing issue? Defense burden sharing negotiation between two allies is deadlocked for more than a year now. The Trump administration asked for a drastic increase, about 5 times more than the previous year increase, for the Korea's cost sharing of the USFK, U.S. forces in Korea. And the South Korean government responded with a 13% raise. Do you think that Biden administration is going to be much more reasonable than Trump administration in dealing with this issue, so that they can resolve, meet in somewhere in between, 5 times?
Well, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope there will be resumption and continuation of joint maneuvers between our two countries. I think Trump made an enormous mistake in unilaterally discontinuing the joint maneuvers. And I think the United States could play a very important role, and I think that we have to recognize what's realistic for Korea to provide by way of burden sharing and to walk away from the demands made by Trump.
I partially agree with him, Martin. I'm not sure that was the biggest mistake by the Trump. I'm sorry.
I think.
On this.
Okay. You finished?
This thing. Yeah.
Okay. Let me talk about.
I remember
okay.
that Trump asked for 400% raise, and that was a little upsetting with Korean people. It was a newspaper. They almost riot. What do you mean 400% raise? And then the Korean government counteroffer 17% or 14%. I'm sorry, like Professor said. 400%, of course, but that really, I don't think Trump was very serious about it. He said, well, adding all these things, Korea is rich. They are part of the GDP 11th in international ranking. You can afford it. So you gotta pay following GDP's rating. And that's why we don't begin and people got upset, and then Trump's rating was down to the bottom because of this particular issue. And then when Biden became a president, the first thing she said was, I will substantially reduce this. We haven't heard anything yet. Substantially reduced to how much? I don't think Trump really meant that 400% a deal. Well, she didn't set it back, but so I'm anxiously waiting for the Biden's policy. All right, then what percentage? Remember, there is billions of dollars to spend, almost 80% or more military supplies and weapons, everything was imported from the USA, bought it from it, spent billions of dollars. So the Korean government asked that you got to consider this too as part of this. Anyway, it's still up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen. Biden didn't say anything yet. That's not a hot issue to him. So I'm waiting. What is the bottom figure? What, 100%, 14%, 16%? That's what Korea was suggesting.
Just realize he's only been in office for about 2 weeks now. Give him a little time here on this issue.
Yeah, I do believe there's going to be quiet diplomacy. Secondly, there's recognition that the security alliance is critically important, and so getting to a special measures agreement is a very important part of that to move forward with the security alliance. So I think there will be quiet diplomacy. They will work this out because it's important, and I think you're going to see a shift in attitude because the Biden administration is not going to see the security alliance as a liability and something that's purely costing the American public. I think they'll view it as an asset that needs to be nurtured and strengthened, and so they'll get to now there'll be hard bargaining behind the behind the public notice, but I think that bargaining will yield an equitable agreement, and I think they will get to an equitable agreement.
I think that ROK U.S. joint military exercise has the same problems. Trump administration considered that as just the expenses, cost of doing this exercise, while South Korean government tried to appease to Kim Jong-un administration because having this joint military exercise may provoke North Korea militarily. So somehow. Since the Singapore summit between Trump and Kim, for more than 3 years, we did not have any major joint military exercises. That is going to be a really problem because fight tonight is a motto of USFK, And if you don't exercise, then how can you be ready to fight any time? So it's going to be a big problem. It's the same. I hope that this kind of diplomacy will help to resume the joint military exercise as well.
I agree with that.
Well, bipartisan support in the United States for that.
Okay, great. Okay, one more about Korea-Japan relations. Recently, President Biden had a telephone talk with Prime Minister Suga, and we hear that they had a chance to talk about the past history issue between Korea and Japan, including comfort women issue. Do you think that President Biden can play some type of mediator role between Korea and Japan to improve our relations? Because it's very important for our trilateral cooperation among U.S., Korea, and Japan to deal with many issues, right? Rise of China and other challenges that we are facing in the region.
I absolutely think that can happen, and I think it should happen.
So,
I agree, and I
think role that President Biden can play, mediating role.
Well, I think President Biden and the team he's put in place will work hard to strengthen that trilateral cooperation. It's important for security. It's important for dealing with China, as you said. I think it's also important for the three countries across the entire spectrum of engagement in Asia, whether it's in multilateral or regional organizations. The U.S., South Korea, and Japan should be aligned, and I think that united front among the three countries is important, especially as we confront the challenge imposed by China. So I think there will be considerable effort there. I think it's also an important element in trying to get to WTO reform. So the cooperation involving Japan, Korea, and the U.S., I think is a very important piece of what the Biden administration is trying to do as they build out a more comprehensive strategy for Asia.
Let me.
Okay, times, we only have about 6 minutes left. So I would like to give you probably 1 minute closing remark, each of you. So, Honorable Jay King.
Let Jay go first.
Japan and Korea.
Jay, go first.
That Biden says you gotta get along. If you know the history of Korea and Japan, it's easy to say. But in my generation, there's a lot of hard feeling. For younger generation, they don't know the history. When I was born in Korea, we were under Japan's control. We don't have any sovereignty, nothing. So that was a cruel, really, I don't even want to think about that. So it is a bad feeling. That's not going to disappear that quick. It takes right now, Quad, I'm very happy about that. Why they put us in Quad Plus? Because it's still this hard feeling. But it's gradually, I wouldn't say that, rapidly disappearing right now. I look very optimistic. Korea, Japan has a lot of things in common. Just it'll take a little time. And by the way, U.S. should help us. And this is getting much, much better. Younger people are much more liberal. They don't remember all this past history. I look very optimistic.
Thank you. Honorable Frost, closing remark, please.
I am optimistic that our government will play a very constructive role in trying to bring Japan and Korea to a better place. It is in our interest and it's in your interest, and we have the type people in this administration who are very good at this and who are not going to be bombastic and who are not going to be showboating without going into a great deal about who was doing the showboating in the last 4 years, but who will play a very constructive role. And I think that the president understands that. I think President Biden is a very serious guy with a world view, which has not always been the case, even with Democratic presidents. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised in terms of how he plays a constructive role.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very optimistic about the U.S.-Korea relationship. It's been a very enduring relationship, dating back to the immediate post-World War II period. We have worked together on a range of issues. Our militaries have cooperated since that time in combat action as well as in exercises. So I think we have a very robust foundation for a 21st century security relationship with South Korea. South Korea is critically important in working with the U.S. to create the right kind of security environment in the Asia-Pacific region. I think on the economic side, we have a strong foundation with the bilateral trade agreement. It's a high standard agreement, and it's something that we can build on to the benefit of both Americans and Koreans. But at the same time, using that bilateral relationship to hopefully, with the Biden administration, move into joining the CPTPP and really raising the standards for technology, investment, and trade in the region, which would help bring the U.S. Economic engagement to a higher level to match what we're doing on security. I think we also have a strong relationship with regard to energy. The United States, as Martin pointed out, has been exporting crude oil, but also liquefied natural gas. And as South Korea has moved away from nuclear power generation and trying to embrace renewables, liquefied natural gas is the critical transition fuel. And so that relationship has expanded into new areas now on the energy side. But we can also cooperate on renewables. I think technology and technology standards is another area where we share a strong relationship, especially in the area of semiconductors, where our companies work very closely together. This is an area of strategic importance that China would like to get its hands on, and so I think the U.S. and South Korea are in a position to lead efforts on standards with semiconductors and more broadly with technology. And then finally, the people-to-people relationship. I think it's a robust relationship, not only in the business world, but also culturally. We're strongly connected. And I believe all of these things portend very, very strongly for a strong U.S.-South Korea relationship. The question is, what do we do with it more broadly in the region to promote security and economic prosperity and to confront the assertiveness of China? That's going to be the challenge going forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have 70-minute long, excellent and very helpful discussions to promote our understanding of each other and strengthening our alliance ties. I really appreciate your frank and excellent comments and participation, Honorable Bustani, Honorable Frost, and Honorable Kim. Before concluding today's webinar, on behalf of the co-sponsors of this webinar, I would like to thank Peter H. Lane, Ken Choi, and other staff members for their excellent assistance. 8 years ago, in December 2013, when the Vice President at that time visited Seoul, Vice President Biden, in one of his speeches, he said that it's never been a good bet to bet against America, and America will continue to place its bet on South Korea. I'm very much sure that majority of Korean people agree and trust our longtime American ally. We hope that our American friends do the same. With this note, I would like to end today's webinar. Thank you very much, and look forward to talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, good to see you again, Charles and Mark. Nice talking to you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Great to be with you, Jay. Thank you.